Soundstripe. Soundstripe. Soundstripe.
Welcome in, everybody, to the NFL Week 7 preview show with Uncle Phil and Smooth Andy. Hope everyone is having a great night. Uncle Phil, Smooth Andy, hope you guys are doing well. Looking forward to hearing you guys hash it out tonight. A lot to discuss.
Yeah, should be a good week. Look, we have gotten more information. Teams that, what you typically have in weeks 5, 6, and 7. Teams have kind of played enough teams to where you figure out those teams have realized who's good and who's bad. And certainly some bad teams are making some moves today. Some good teams are trying to make some moves. Really interesting lines this week to look at and discuss and to guess, and certainly trying to figure out how this is going to shape up. Should be just a great week 7 after just a crazy week 6. Smooth Andy, what are you thinking about this week?
Not much, really.
Any reflections post-mortem on last week?
Yeah. Geez, I went. I think it was 1-9 for the week, or 1-10. Yep. It was 1-10 because I had all the home dogs and they went 0-9, and then I went 1-1 in the other 2 picks. Can't remember the last time I had a week like that. I might, maybe I have sometime years ago, but yeah, that was just awful. Yeah, I thought about just betting out of the Jets bet on Monday night, but then I was just like, at some point it's almost like if you're going to get machine gunned to death by 10 people, adding an 11th isn't really big. Isn't that big of a thing, So.
Well, look, I mean, you knew it was could happen. I mean, 2 weeks ago, underdogs of 5 points or more were hitting at about 78%, and then are actually higher than that. It went to 78% last week, and then this week, of course, now down to 64%. There certainly is some reversion. Vegas wasn't going to let Sharps win all the money. It was time to go public, clean out some of the money that the Sharps had taken from them, give the public some money back, entice the public back into the arena, and only to dash their hopes, which probably is going to be next week. So I've already looked at, in guessing the lines, I'm assuming that there's going to be some really interesting lines as we kind of go through this, as we guess the lines that could set up favorable to just crush the publics. Interesting thing for you, major reversals in betting trends this past week. Again, favorites 5 points or more, which haven't covered it all, went 4-1 ATS this past week. The Ravens, Packers, and Texans, Ravens, Packers, Texans, and Falcons covered. Only the Eagles did not, but should have, if not for a return block punt at the end of the first half. The totals, the other thing that when I was looking at the lines and kind of making out my notebook, I thought there would be some safe haven in totals for me. And so I looked at the lines and thought, man, these don't look right. I am not jumping into this because I just didn't like what I was liking. And I jumped to some totals. Thought I'd find some safe haven in totals because totals under 40 had gone 8-4 against the spread to the under. So thought, hey, well, let's go to the under. And all those totals went 0 and everything that was under 40 went 0-3 against the spread on Sunday. You and I talked about 4 road favorites went 9-0 against the spread. Rarely happens. It's like once in a millennium that happens, or once a season, and it happened this week, and it took a lot of people out. Interesting enough to me, the only thing that I noticed is I went game by game, and the better quarterback won every single game. If you look at it, the better quarterback won every single game. So that was interesting to do. The other thing that I noticed that the NFC North now, interesting enough, is now 18-4 against the spread. Just shows you what is happening with the NFC North. Let's see what else happened today. The NFL announced that the Super Bowl will run through Atlanta again in 2028. Thought you'd be happy about that. Usually we cover MVPs. That's typically kind of Patrick Mahomes or bust right now. Super Bowl contenders, odds have kind of tightened up to Kansas City, San Francisco, Baltimore, a little bit with Detroit. We'll kind of get into what's happening with Detroit right now. But again, I always ask you each week, what is your best team in the AFC? What is your best team in the NFC?
Kansas City is my best team in the AFC, and I think Detroit. I still don't necessarily believe in Minnesota, which is to say, I'm not quite there yet with them. I think that they won a lot of games that felt close, and they haven't played a lot of like great teams yet. And I think this week we'll know more about them.
Yep. I am. I'm with you on Detroit. You and I are aligned. I'm not aligned with you on Kansas City. I think Baltimore is. I just feel like that things are aligning up. Interesting enough, since 1990, the playoffs percentages for each record. Teams that are 4-2 right now, after 6 weeks, have a 63.8% chance of making it. Right now in the AFC, that's the Bills, Ravens, Steelers, Texans, and Chiefs. Chargers are 3-2 because of the bye week. The NFC includes, interestingly enough, Commanders, Vikings, Lions, Bears, Packers, Falcons, and Buccaneers. Not exactly the names we thought we'd see there at 4-2, but interestingly enough, all 4 of the NFC North teams have that record. And the question I've got for you, Smooth Andy, is can all 4 teams in the NFC North make the playoffs the way things are right now? Think about it. Let's look at the NFC West. Who's going to go from there?
Well, I don't think – I think the problem is scheduling. And since the NFC North teams have to play each other twice, somebody's going to fade. It's just going to happen. So, no, I don't think that – it's mathematically it's probably possible, but I just don't think it's going to happen. 2 or 3.
Yep. Agreed. Teams that are 3-3 right now only have a 35% chance of making it. That's the AFC Broncos, Colts, NFC 49ers, Seahawks, Eagles, Cowboys. Any one of those teams strike you that'll probably make it. I certainly look at the 49ers right offhand. I think I don't think out of the Broncos, Colts, I don't think that either one of those teams will make it. 49ers, Seahawks, Eagles, or Cowboys. I only think the 49ers will. What do you think?
I'm not out on the Seahawks yet, but yeah, the rest of those I agree.
Feels like to me Geno's falling off a cliff.
They lost to San Francisco this past week,
and the week before the Giants.
Yeah, I know, but name a team that hasn't had a bad loss this year. I guess you could say Minnesota and Kansas City, but I mean, one bad loss, it happens. We saw a lot of 0-2 teams in week 3 that pulled off wins against teams they had no business beating. But, I mean, the Rams beat who? San Francisco?
Every time I see Geno Smith, Geno Smith looks like a guy who just got robbed. He's like, what happened? He's like, I don't know what happened. It just kind of happened fast. It just happened. And I'm just like, I don't know. We'll see. Somebody just pointed out, rightfully so, that Eagles are 3-2, and they are because the bye week kind of lumped them there in the 3-2, maybe unfairly. But after that performance against Cleveland off a bye week, I stuck them in 3-3 because they do not look good to me. Something's wrong there. I don't care what Jalen Hurts come out and said in the bye week, where it says that he and Nick Sirianni are harmonious. Nick Sirianni certainly didn't look harmonious to me, yelling at the fans embarrassingly. You just can't do that, right? I mean, you're a head coach in the NFL. Can you imagine Bill Belichick yelling at the fans? I mean, what is he doing?
Yeah, but in his defense, we're talking about Philadelphia fans, so they can probably pick at a scab pretty easily, more than most fan bases.
If you can't do that, you don't have the temperament to do it. Like for me, like I've always said, people that are betting, I always ask people. My favorite question to ask people who are like, yeah, I bet, and maybe don't know me and don't know, what I do or anything. I was like, oh, really? Well, tell me about that. Hey, and I always ask them, I was like, first question, my first tell question is like, who's your favorite team? And they're like, oh, it's this team. And I'm like, would you ever bet against your favorite team? And he's like, no, never bet against favorite team. I'm like, well, then you lose. You don't win at gambling because you don't have the right temperament. If you can't bet against your favorite team, then you probably lose. So again, temperament goes with coaching as well. And if my whole point is that if you yell at fans, you don't have the right temperament to be a head coach. And I don't think Sirianni does. And this is just a disaster waiting to happen. And sooner that I think Jeffrey Lurie makes that decision for Nick Sirianni and hopefully gets a coordinator in there, then the Eagles can potentially regain what they're missing, because right now they have the pieces to go the playoffs, but they are destined to head outside the playoffs to me if this continues. So we'll see. We had in the comments, we got Philly fans are very similar to Everton fans. So just a comment, a shot across the bow, Smooth Andy. Do you resemble that, or where do you live with that?
I don't know. I haven't. I've never been to a game at Everton. I've always wanted to. But so I've never really seen them behave toward the players. I know if the players don't play well, they'll give them a hard time. But it seems more like we want more from you than this kind of thing. I don't. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of chanting, a lot of singing and stuff during the games. They drown out the opposing, fans sometimes at away games. So I like that about them. But if they're, interpersonally cruel to people over sports, then they shouldn't do that. I've never liked that in fans who just can't realize that these guys, most of them are giving the best they can, and they've lost a game, and that's just the way it is sometimes,
Well, fan is short for fanatic, and sometimes that goes a little bit overboard. It comes with the territory. Come with the territory is this time of year is that in the bye week, we had teams that came off their bye week this week. In the Chargers, the Eagles, the Lions, and the Titans. Chargers and Lions certainly look like they came off the bye week. The Eagles and Titans did not look like they come off the bye week. Look, you've got I understand the Titans are rebuilding and they're kind of hamstrung with potentially the wrong quarterback. Well, he is the wrong quarterback. Let's just go ahead and say it. Will Levis is not your franchise quarterback. If you're tied to that, it's a boat anchor. He threw for 96 yards this week against a defense that Trevor Lawrence threw for almost 400 yards the week before. So let's not act like that's something there. But when it comes to the Eagles, you have an offensive head coach with a lot of the pieces there, and Jalen Hurts off a bye in scripted plays. The first two series goes 0 for 5 in his throws with 2 punts. I mean, to me, that's distressing. You and I talked about that. The tells of like, hey, do we trust the Eagles to come off the bye and see how they're going to do, and actually are they going to be that kind of team that is going to be competitive? And the bye would tell us a lot. The bye certainly told me a lot. Did it tell anything to you?
Not really. They are the same team that finished last year. To me, I wanted to see if they would come out with a lot of fight this year, and bye or no bye, they haven't. So there's some talent there. I can't explain it. They have some good players on their defensive line. They drafted high in the first round from Georgia.
Yep.
They got 2 good receivers, and they got a quarterback who at least 2 years ago was very good. And I don't really understand. Even if you don't get along with your coach, you can still play good football. I don't really get it. So I guess maybe the locker room's not in good shape, but to me that's an indictment a little bit of the players, because you can't let disliking your head coach dissuade you from playing good football and wanting to win together. I mean, look at Tom Coughlin and Bill Parcells and Belichick. I mean, a lot of those guys had locker rooms that didn't seem to be particularly happy with them, with the way they were being treated, and they still managed to win because they got the right character guys in there who would play anyway. I don't really understand what's happening there. Well, so I'm not sure if getting rid of Sirianni solves it. I'm not really sure what does. So,
well, I think Sirianni's part of the problem, 100%. Now,
part of the problem, yes. I'm just not sure if he's enough to make them be a winning team without him.
Well, it depends. You bring up a good point, because we don't know if Jalen Hurts is salvageable, because right now I'm not sure that Jalen Hurts is the guy. But what is not in question is that in most every locker room is that the coach and the quarterback are the 2 leaders in the locker room. And when you have the 2 leaders at odds with each other, certainly doesn't make for a good situation, creates more of a toxic environment. We'll see what's going on. They certainly don't seem harmonious. The Eagles are not playing that way. Huge. We'll kind of get into that as we go. What is that feedback?
Sorry, it's text coming into my laptop that I have to use for video because the other laptop doesn't work. I either have to mute myself and the laptop while we're in the middle of
all good. We're putting things together with duct tape and baling wire over here, so we're in good shape. Look, we've got, speaking of teams off buys, interesting things. We've got Kansas City coming back off a bye. Our goal for them was like, hey, they needed to regroup. Mahomes is tied interceptions, statistically one of the worst years of his career. He's got 6 ties interceptions when he went off the bye, tied with 6 interceptions with Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. Not really the company you want to keep. Miami, needed some help getting some people healthy, as a lot of people do. But Devon Achane was out with a concussion. We'll see if he comes back. The Rams, literally everybody on their team need to get healthy, and Minnesota keeps the momentum going. Big win over the Jets. So it'll be interesting to see this week going into the bye. We've got Chicago certainly riding high, trending up. Caleb Williams, his passer rating has gone up every single week, and he looks extremely comfortable. We saw it, 3 weeks ago. We saw the progression of him. Certainly it's come to fruition. Now, you could certainly say that who he's played hasn't been the best, but interesting deal. This is an indictment on the Bears quarterbacks over the past few years. He's just 2 TDs, 2 passing TDs away from tying the Bears single season rookie record in touchdown passes. So interesting. Dallas off a bye. I kept waiting for a shoe to drop today with McCarthy. Jerry Jones seems defiant, denying any mistakes. He had a very tense discussion with again, he's got to be the center of attention, right? So he had a very tense discussion with reporters yesterday, and then his call-in show today, he threatened to replace the people that were asking him questions. He's like, I can get other people to ask me questions. So really kind of an odd thing in Dallas to do. This week going in, before we get to this week, we have to cover last night. 22 accepted penalties last night, just unwatchable. Tying the record for penalties called in a game this season. And speaking of Monday Night Football, this coming week, we have to suffer through ESPN putting 2 Monday Night Football games on again on the at the exact same time. Well, they're 45 minutes apart, but again, why are you doing that? And then you put one of them on ESPN Plus. So it's just stupid. I don't know why they think that's a good idea. I mean, I can see it in the playoffs where you're trying to force somebody into streaming, but people are going to make choices. And the game you put this week on ESPN Plus is the Chargers at Arizona. Not too many people are going to watch that. People are certainly going to be tuned into Baltimore, Tampa Bay. Just kind of an odd day. Anyway, let's get to the lines, man.
Okay. First one is Thursday, 8:15 p.m. Denver 3-3 at New Orleans 2-4. Denver coming off a loss to the Chargers 23-16. New Orleans coming off the loss to Tampa Bay 51-27.
Interesting to me. Obviously in the dome, really no weather to this one. My guess on this one was I put New Orleans as a favorite, as a home team. I put them at 1.5, and I put a total at 39.
Okay. Something, and I'm not sure how to explain this, but maybe is David Carr still out?
Derek Carr.
Or Derek Carr, pardon me. Is he still out?
He's still out, and also didn't cover this, but their kick returner, their sensational kick returner, Rashid Shaheed is out, as well as wide receiver Chris Olave with a concussion.
All right.
So those are out. But Denver also has out cornerback Patrick Surtain.
Yeah. Well, it opened. You said New Orleans minus 1.5. I said 3.5. It opened New Orleans 1.5. It's Denver 2.5 now.
Denver 2.5.
Don't understand that. Not that I love New Orleans, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't justify that kind of move.
What's the total?
Sorry, you said 39. It opened 37.5. It's down to 37.
37. Interesting enough. I have labeled this game as "You Are Who We Thought You Were," and New Orleans has kind of come down to earth. We saw the same thing with Denver when played against Chargers team. They weren't playing the Jets in the rain anymore. They looked like Denver. They look like a team that's missing a lot of pieces, that they're growing franchise, but they've got a roster that needs to be rebuilt. And it's going to take more than one season to do that. It's also the return of Sean Payton to New Orleans. Really interesting storyline there. We'll see how that goes. I think that, Denver will put some pressure and bring a blitz on that. It took, for some reason, it took Todd Bowles, who's obviously a defensive head coach, till the second half to actually blitz Rattler. And I don't know why. I mean, like I said, during this past week's show, it's like, hey, Spencer Rattler was terrible against the blitz in college, and I would just blitz him all day long. And of course, he's returning, and I just I don't know. For me, he's back again at the quarter, and it again took Todd Bowles second half. Second half, he had several sacks. I don't know how many, but I think he had 5 sacks, and he had 2 interceptions. So again, I think probably people saw that and go, hey, Denver's going to just blitz him unmercifully, and that's going to potentially do it. So we'll see. I still think that's certainly Achilles heel. I can certainly see why they're doing that.
Okay. Next up, we got the 9:30 game in London. Again, it's Jacksonville. This time it's New England 1-5 at Jacksonville 1-5. New England lost to Houston 41-21. Jacksonville lost to Chicago 35-16 last week in London.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I had loved to watch wrestling, and I loved it. And they would all—I don't know if they know they have these now, but it was back then. It was the loser leave town match, and it was like whoever loses got to leave town. And this feels like one of the loser leave towns. You got two teams that are both 1-5. One team expected to be 1-5. One team most definitely did not. And certainly the loser leave town. If it's the Jags, then the coach leaves too. I fully believe that Shad Khan is going to get rid of Doug Peterson if this thing doesn't go. Doug Peterson's come out publicly and said there's a culture problem. I'm like, well, you're the guy who controls the culture as the coach, and if you're saying that, you're kind of without answer. So really interesting thing. I put this one at I put Jacksonville 3.5, and I put it at 43.5.
Okay, you said 43.5. It opened 41. It's up to 42.5. You said Jacksonville 3.5. I said Jacksonville 2.5. It opened 5.5, and it's still 5.5.
Okay.
I don't see it. I don't know. Maybe it's the Jacksonville London thing, but this is a neutral field. This is a neutral field game between two 1-5 teams. How is one almost a 6-point favorite? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jacksonville's got the better roster.
Yeah, but
and 5 is typically kind of a dead number, and typically if you've got a dead number at 5, the favorite typically will cover in that chance. So interesting enough, it'll be interesting to see how the public comes in on this one. But this feels like I know they're all desperate for Jacksonville, but this just feels like an incredibly desperate team. I feel like that New England, hey, we're bad. We're giving Drake May a chance. He's looking better, but I don't think they have any aspirations of Drake May leading them to playoffs at this point. I think that Jacksonville still thinks they do, and I think Doug Peterson is literally looking for his job this game. If he loses this game, I think he comes home in a separate plane. So I understand why there may be some desperation built into the line. But look, New England coming into the game, this past weekend against Houston, they were using their 6th offensive line combination in 6 weeks. They used a center they signed from the practice squad that week from the Raiders. I mean, it was not a good matchup. Just a tough deal. So maybe that's some reasons why. It's New England's offensive line. We'll see. I'm with you. 2 1-5 teams. I certainly understand your thoughts. I was kind of in the same way. I didn't expect it to be that high, but talking through it with you, I understand.
Okay. Next game is the first of the 1:00 games. Seattle 3-3 at Atlanta 4-2. Seattle coming off the loss to San Francisco 36-24 on Thursday Night Football, so they've got extra rest. And Atlanta coming off the win over Carolina 38-20.
Yeah, I've kind of labeled this game teams that are going in different directions, I think, right now. I feel like that Seattle doing well at first, not doing so well now. Atlanta is doing much better. Coming off that initial loss home game against Pittsburgh with Kirk Cousins with the Achilles, think that he's playing better. Everybody looks better against the Panthers except for the Raiders. But I certainly see Seattle kind of floundering at this point, but Seattle is coming off extra rest. We'll see if that does them any good against this. I'm I'm looking forward to seeing if Seattle does better against that. They're certainly got to get some more people healthy by now. We'll see. I've got this. I've got Atlanta favored by 3.5, and I've got a total at 47.
Okay. You said 47. It opened 48.5. It is up to 51 now.
Okay.
Not a lot of defense expected. You said Atlanta 3.5. I said Atlanta 3.5. Open 2.5, and it is 3 now. So
It
just
is
about
3
right.
now. Okay. Perfect. I'll take that. Big problem with Atlanta right now, not surprisingly. Geno Smith has not had he's not fared well against the blitz. The Falcons are one of the worst teams of getting pressure this season. We knew it going into this. That was the trade-off. That was a big complaint that a lot of people had of like, hey, they're choosing Penix over getting an edge rusher. They went ahead and got Penix, which I still think was the right decision. But they've got Matthew Judon from the Patriots, but still hadn't made a difference. They're still one of the weakest teams in the entire NFL against rushing the passer, creating pressure. Geno Smith, when not rushed, has proven to be very serviceable quarterback. So I certainly lean toward Seattle in this, as much as I've not much of a believer in them. Any thoughts initially on that for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we both picked a higher point spread than it turned out to be. I'm comfortable with 3.5 being the number, and if it comes out 3, then maybe I'll think about Seattle. But I still think Seattle's kind of decent. I know Geno's they've had a rough stretch here, but play San Francisco, that can be a rough stretch. I'm still not a believer in Atlanta. Like, I look at a 4-2 record. I don't see them having a 2-to-1 ratio wins to losses at the end of the year. It's an early sample size, but
yeah.
I'm not convinced that this is a team that's going to be in the mix at the end of the year for the playoffs. Maybe around 500 is what I would think, but I haven't been that impressed by them in their victories. I mean, that Kirk Cousins, when your quarterback has to throw for 500 yards and to win in overtime, if you're winning tight, high-scoring games, I don't think that's a good recipe. You need to play better defense, and I don't know what's wrong with their safeties, because they're both really talented, but they're getting burned left and right. So, not sure what's going on.
We'll let that be the last word. On to the next one.
All right. Tennessee 1-4 at Buffalo 4-2. Tennessee lost to Indianapolis 20-17, and Buffalo comes off a win over the Jets 23-20.
Yeah. Again, weather holding steady this week. No weather in the 50s. No real weather to speak of this week, unfortunately. I will back that up. Let me go back to one potential weather issue on the very first game. The second game. On the London game. Temperature started off at 62. There is a 90% chance of rain in that game. Winds just southwest 9 miles per hour. So didn't cover that. Wanted to make sure and get that in for everybody, because that's pretty much our only significant weather that we're going to have, and it's really the rain and a little lower temperatures. And I think that was our lowest temperature on the board, except for this one. Tennessee at Buffalo, weather 62 but clear. Southwest winds 8 miles per hour. Still not seeing a game starting in the 50s this week, so shouldn't be too bad. These are two teams, again, going in opposite ways. Buffalo winning, but again, beating the bad teams, not really beating the good teams. Tennessee just not really beating anybody due to Will Levis. I've got this game I've got Buffalo 9.5, and I've got a total at 45.
Okay, total, you said 45, open 41.5. It's down to 41. Point spread, you said 9.5. I said 7.5 on Buffalo. It opened 8.5, and it's still 8.5. So split the difference.
All right, fair enough. As talked about, Will Levis just not impressive in his last start. Only threw for 95 yards at home, off a bye against an Indianapolis defense that Trevor Lawrence just torched. Buffalo, the big news with them, they get Amari Cooper. to play alongside Keon Coleman. So that certainly fills a need for him. He may not be the guy he used to be, but at least he is good as long as he doesn't drop the ball. We'll see. Has lots of drops. We'll see, but certainly somebody that they needed, and they quickly released Marquez Valdez-Scantling to make room for Amari Cooper after this. Any thoughts further on this game or on that trade at all?
Yeah, I think you're right about Amari Cooper. I think at best he's a wide receiver 2 now, maybe a 3. He checks all the boxes physically, but he's not. I mean, there's a reason Dallas let him go instead of CeeDee Lamb. To me, back in the day, he was still young, and they let him go. I think they recognized that CeeDee Lamb was the better talent, and if they're going to pay somebody, it had to be him. So I think that's a relatively minor trade, not as big as
that was a financial thing. CD was younger and was cheap at the time.
True.
They couldn't pay 2 number ones
right.
On that. But yeah, agreed. They certainly looked to the future. They stuck with the right person, to your point.
Okay. Yep.
Let's move on.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, we got Cincinnati 2-4 at Cleveland 1-5. Cincinnati coming off the win over the Giants 17-7. Cleveland coming off the loss to Philadelphia 2016.
Look, their records may be similar, but the teams aren't close. I've got Cincinnati on the road in the battle for Ohio. Cincinnati favored by 6.5, total at 43.5.
Okay. Let's see, 43.5. It opened 43.5. It's down to 42. You said 6.5. I said 2.5. I actually couldn't. I don't know. I couldn't imagine this being in Cincinnati and them playing and it being an 8.5, 9-point spread. I just don't see that big of a space between these teams. But it opened 4 and it's up to 6.5. So you're right on where the current total is.
Okay. And what's and I put 43.5. What's the total?
43.5. It opened. It's down to 42.
Oh, opened where I thought. Okay, good. Well, it's kind of where I thought it was. I certainly see this game, very interesting. I think, Cincinnati, I was impressed with them that, look, they came off a very emotional game, a game that they really thought they had to have against Baltimore, and then had to turn around and play on primetime on the road against the Giants. The Giants are really, a frisky underdog, are playing with a lot of passion. Brian Daboll's coaching his butt off. Daniel Jones is playing really well this year. I mean, he's not elite, but he's playing really well, potentially one of his better seasons right now. But Cleveland, look, Deshaun Watson is just bad. There was an article in Athletic that came out just yesterday that one executive said that Cleveland could cut him and no one would even pick him up. Deshaun Watson's EPA, which is expected points added, is now 590 out of 592 quarterbacks who have started the first 6 games of the season since 2000. He is, really playing at an all-time low, just looks bad back there. Kevin Stefanski is playing him, but he's playing him because the owner has guaranteed Watson this money, and he's stuck him with that. And so he's towing the company line. He's saying Deshaun Watson's our quarterback. He gives us the best chance to win, but he's just being a good soldier. Look, when you have a bad owner, things just kind of get screwed up. That's what's happened with the Jets. Obviously, it's what's happened with the Cowboys. These things, it's just a bad deal. Look, he's just bad at, Cleveland's not a good team, but, they've got to switch at some point to Jameis Winston because they just don't have a prayer with Cleveland. But makes it a good team to bet against. interesting. I'll tell you how bad it is in Cleveland this season. Now that Amari Cooper has been traded, I think they had it was either 7 or 9 touchdowns on the season. I think it was 7. And Amari Cooper counted for 2 of those. Now there are several people. There's obviously 5 people now tied with 1. And one of those, your leader is Rodney McLeod, and he plays defense. Tied for the touchdown leader on Cleveland. That's how bad things are. Any thoughts on that?
Geez. I mean, Deshaun doesn't look good at all, no question. That whole team just looks terrible. Their defense doesn't look like it should. Myles Garrett doesn't look like he should. The offensive line is a sieve when I've watched. It's just, man, they just need to blow it up and start over. I mean, trade Myles Garrett, dump Deshaun. I don't know. End up with a Gardner Minshew or somebody for a year or 2, and then come back from the dead.
I don't see how you ever trade Myles Garrett. He's your best player on your entire team. He's just not playing right now because his foot is injured. But I'm
not saying trade him because he's not any good anymore. I'm saying trade him because you're not going to be any good until he's later in his career when he's going to be more expensive and probably losing a step. So you might as well get a first rounder or something out of it. If you're trading him for a 3rd rounder or 4th, then hang on to him. But if somebody really wants a Reggie White style plug-in and for the playoff run, then see what you can get for him.
Well, certainly nobody else could use that more than Detroit Lions. We'll certainly get to them, but onward and upward to another NFC North team in our next game.
Yep, Houston 5-1 at Green Bay 4-2. Houston after a win over New England 41-21. Green Bay after a win over Arizona 34-13.
What's the difference between first place and last place? Apparently 1 game. This team's 5-1. Houston, they're in first place. Green Bay's in 4-2. They're in last place in their division, or at least certainly tied there. This game, 67 degrees, 3% chance of rain, winds from the southwest at 7 miles per hour. Interesting, really interesting game on this one for a lot of reasons. I've got my guess. I've got Green Bay -2.5, and I've got a total at 47.5 on this one.
Okay. The total 47.5. It opened 47 and it's up to 47.5. So pretty much nailed that. The point spread, you said 2.5. I said 2. It opened 3. It's still 3.
Okay. All right. Interesting deal. Look, I mean, Houston's a completely different team as long as Mixon plays. When Mixon plays, they're an absolute handful. That's why I took them as one of my best bets this week, along with the whole sundry of issues. When I look at teams or when I make my assessments on betting, I look at who do I trust. And I trusted Houston to be good as long as Joe Mixon's playing. I trusted New England to be bad consistently to do that. So worked out well for me this weekend. Look, I think that C.J. Stroud is just doing a remarkable job. He's got to be in the MVP discussion. He's covering up a lot of deficiencies in this Texans team. Green Bay leads the NFL in turnover differential. They've got 3 tight ends I like. They also lead the NFL in what's considered big plays. Jordan Love, again, you kind of take the good with the bad, right? The good, he's got 12 TD passes in his first 4 games, which is this season, which is tied with 2011 Aaron Rodgers and 1996 Brett Favre as the second most in Packers history. The bad with Jordan Love is he has 6 interceptions in 4 starts this season, and 1 interception in his previous 8 starts before then. They won, but this is certainly an issue and could be an issue going forward. when they play somebody other than Cardinals. Potentially could be an issue this week. And again, he's a gunslinger. He's certainly still more Brett Favre than Aaron Rodgers. But man, if you're one of those people, either one, that's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and he can certainly get there. Really interesting about Green Bay's defense. Green Bay's defense, they've always had this great championship type offense, but never had the championship defense. Green Bay's defense is really stepping up. Held Arizona to a season low 16 first downs, also held them to a season low in scoring as well. So I thought it was kind of risky, and I talked about it in our preseason podcast about Jeff Hafley coming in from Boston College. He only had 1 year of defensive coordinator experience, and that was at Ohio State, where he was actually co-defensive coordinator. I think he's done a really remarkable job this year. I'm really impressed with him, and I think he's doing a great job. How do you see that game playing out?
This is one of my favorite games of the week. Really, Detroit, Minnesota, and this one are my favorite too.
Yeah.
I think, boy, that's it. You know what? I don't know how the game's going to play out because I'm impressed by both teams.
Right.
Probably a little more so by Houston, but I think their schedule hasn't been quite. I think Green Bay's had some tougher games. I don't know. This is going to be really tough. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Jordan Love seemed like, to your point, his interceptions, he seems to have taken a half step back this year. He's not quite as dynamic and as positive outcome as he was last year. And Green Bay looks a little like they've taken a half step back, just a tiny bit.
You mean Houston?
Yeah, they're 5-1 though. I mean, so it's hard to nitpick. I mean, Kansas City's undefeated.
They are playing in the NFC South, which is arguably one of the worst divisions.
Yeah, and they just got to play New England. Assuming they're playing all of the AFC East as well, they got the easy one first. So, or the Jets, I guess technically. We'll see. These are a couple teams I'm still not sold on as contenders, but they're definitely in the conversation, and we might know a little more after this weekend. I'm sorry to not give you a more definitive answer, but that's
no. I think that covers it. I think it really does.
There's still two teams that I'm not really sure about yet. So.
Yep. Well, I think we'll be a lot more sure after this weekend. We'll let that be the last word. Moving on to the next one.
All right. Next one's Miami 2-3 at Indy 3-3. Miami coming off the bye, and Indy coming off a win over Tennessee 20-17.
Yeah, I mean, this one to me is you boils down to your battle of your backup quarterbacks. This one's in a dome, no weather, of course. My guess was Indianapolis 4.5, and I put a total at 45.
Okay, you said 45. It opened 42.5. It's up to 44 now.
Okay.
And as for the point spread, you said Indy 4.5. I said Indy 2.5. It opened 3.5. It's still 3.5. So we surrounded it.
3.5. All right. Interesting enough, Mike McDaniel came out yesterday, said that he does expect to see Tua this year. Tua's had 4 concussions in 2 years. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
It's really a gambling thing. It's just kind of a human thing, but I want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, part of me wants him to just retire and move on. But the problem is the science. I'm kind of speaking out of my but the CTE science doesn't seem to be where we can say with any degree of certainty that somebody can withstand another concussion after they've had 4 in 2 years or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're doing their best, but do you want to take that risk and end up being a junior Seau in 10 or 20 years? I don't know. I'd like to have him keep playing football, but if I don't want to watch him deteriorate later in his life and know that it was for my entertainment, if you know what I mean. So I don't know. If I were him, I would.
You're 25. You're invincible, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
but we've got a lot of cautionary tales out there, and I'm sure
really good points. I mean, the NFL's fixed a lot of rules, but that's you pointed out the biggest hole in this whole thing is that we don't have enough data right now or science to go, hey, this many concussions in this many time frame, and you're done.
Yeah.
And we're always like, oh, it's a player's decision, do all that, and certainly it should be, but sometimes you have to save players from themselves. Interesting to see how that comes out. Miami certainly is a different team without him, but they weren't necessarily a good team with him prior to him going out. So not sure that they're actually going to make a playoff run there with him. But again, that's the AFC is really this top-heavy conference where you've got Baltimore and you've got Kansas City, at really the top. You've kind of got Cincinnati and Buffalo kind of below them, but you've got kind of some really bad teams underneath them. I mean, it's just kind of a mess. I've never seen the AFC look as bad as it is. The NFC doesn't really have that dominant team. We think that Minnesota's really good. We think that Detroit's really good. Without Hayden Hudson, it's going to be a big difference. Certainly, Detroit's defense is a little leaky, especially on the back end. But you have lots of good teams, and you certainly have tons of good quarterbacks there in the NFC as well, which makes that completely compelling and fun to watch. And it's going to be interesting to see how that race comes out. You're on in the AFC. It almost is going to be like the 6th and 7th team that gets into the playoffs is going to get there by default because nobody else would actually win a game. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. I want to get your question. I have a question for you on the last question on this Miami-Indianapolis game is that how do you go back to Anthony Richardson with Flacco winning games and potentially your job is this isn't preseason. You're trying to make it to the playoffs. Last year, you're Shane Steichen. You are not a good coach. You're a great coach. I mean, we talked about this in the preseason. I said in the preseason, I said, look at what Gardner Minshew, he was able to get Gardner Minshew the playoffs last year. And look, Gardner Minshew he's going to look completely different at the Raiders. Already does. He's already benched. Aiden O'Connell's there. Whole different thing. But this is a production league, as Mike Tomlin likes to say, certainly much more eloquent than I do. But it's a production league, and you're trying to get the playoffs. You were one game away from getting the playoffs last year, got beat up by Houston. And you've got a great opportunity with the AFC just sucking for the most part, especially at, the bottom end of the position. How do you not play Joe Flacco, or do you go back to Anthony Richardson?
Well, I posted a tweet, I think it was before this past week, that they had moved him to third string. Only then I found out that he was still considered banged up. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I think you stay with Flacco until you fade in the race, which they might or might not. To your point, the AFC is not particularly impressive. I think you stick with Flacco for now.
Correct.
And then if he fades, then you throw Anthony Richardson again just to remind the fans of why you're probably going to have to move on after this year.
Yeah. No,
so that's probably what I would do.
All right. That'll be the last word. We'll move on.
Okay.
To the other battle that you're most excited about.
Yeah. Detroit 4-1 at Minnesota 5-0. Detroit coming off the win over Dallas 47-9. Wow. And Minnesota coming off a bye.
Look, I will try not to gloat about the Dallas game because I've been saying it all year about Dallas, and said they'd have a losing record, said to be able to be out of playoff contention by Thanksgiving. They are well on the way. Certainly was all over that one.
Don't tell me you didn't. Don't tell me you saw this coming though. 47-9 at home. I mean, to anybody.
Yeah,
it's one thing for them to be disappointing. It's another to be just. They're just getting run off the field by good teams.
Look, they're not even. You could say they're one-dimensional because they're just a passing on the offense, but I would say they're less than one-dimensional because all they've got is Amari Cooper. I mean, they've got Jake Ferguson a little bit, but it's really kind of the Amari Cooper show, and that's it. You double him, and you just take away their offense. I mean,
You mean CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah. So sorry, CeeDee Lamb, and thank you. And so you double him, and you kind of take them out of the show. So look, I mean, it's tough deal. Jerry Jones has, single-handedly kind of ruined this entire roster. I mean, again, we talked about it last week. You had a chance to pick up Derrick Henry. He wanted to play for Dallas. He said he wanted to go play for Dallas all season. You wouldn't pay him $8 million, but you overpaid for Dak, who's a B, sometimes B-, sometimes B+, but he's a solid B quarterback at best. and you put it all on him because again, without a 100-yard rusher or without them getting at least 100 yards in rushing, he's got a losing record. And of course, how many yards they rushed for on Sunday? 53. So we'll get in Dallas in a second. But again, Detroit, Minnesota, it's the battle for first place, and it's the battle for the North. What a great game. Will be interesting. Less of a little bit of shine taken off without Aiden Hutchinson. What a terrible injury. Saw the unedited views of that on social media. That was ugly. Had to be so much torque generated by him. Just shows you how much energy those guys played to just snap your leg. Like that was just pretty gruesome. Typical recovery, 6 to 8 months on that with a broken tibia. Dan Campbell came out and said it thought it could be like 4 to 6 months, which was interesting. 4 months would put him in line to play for the Super Bowl if that's possible. We'll see how that comes out. They did sign today defensive end Isaiah Thomas off the Bengals practice squad to try to add some depth. I know everybody wants to go after a big name. Obviously, you mentioned one earlier. Also, Max Crosby is a big name that surfaced because he's from Michigan, and it would be a good fit from that standpoint. But I just don't know that you have the room for him and the trade value. I think that would be I think that's more internet fodder than anything else because you'd have to literally trade so much to get him. And again, if you're trading that much, then you're assuming that the Raiders would want to trade one of their best players. And just similar to Myles Garrett, which I don't think Cleveland would trade Myles Garrett. He's their best player. And the same thing goes for the Raiders. They're not trading him. And especially with Antonio Pierce, he's a defensive coach. He values defense. You're not trading him. It's just not going to happen. I think that they signed that. But again, interesting, something we didn't bring up earlier, but something that I know that 3 Tuesdays from now on November 5th at 4 p.m. is the NFL trade deadline. A lot of teams will be making moves. We'll talk about that more as time gets closer, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 3 weeks. I think today the big moves of Amari Cooper and Devontae Adams, this is only the beginning. Should be kind of a wild free agency period.
Keep in mind also that the Jets, right after making the trade, they told Hassan Reddick's agent to go find a trade. I guess they can't give him the money he wants and still carry Devontae Adams' contract. So now he just has nowhere to go. So that might be a Detroit spot. I'm also not a big believer that even if you lose your best defensive player and a great pass rushing defensive end, if you're 4-1, you made the playoffs last year, you're still a really good team. You don't have to go out and find somebody to fill that spot. I mean, you can do next man up, hope that the defense is 90, 95% as good as it was with Hutchinson and still have the same offense. I mean, you look at the Chiefs, they lost Hollywood Brown before the season. They lost one of their depth players at wide receiver during the season. Then again, they lost Rashee Rice. And all they're doing is just picking guys up off the street and filling it in. I'm not saying that's easy to do or say, but you don't have to go get Myles Garrett to replace Hutchinson. You're going to probably make the playoffs with the team you have. It's just a question of what you do there. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's the big point is that you're going to make the playoffs, but it's like what impact can you realistically have? I don't think they're a Super Bowl team without Aiden Hutchinson. I think wide receivers are a completely different deal because in Kansas City you've got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and they make any receiver look good, and they make those pieces look good. Aiden Hutchinson was literally, I know he was your choice for MVP. Wasn't really realistic as for an MVP just because he's a defensive player and we're in an offensive league. But he was the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. And to make a statement on what of a big impact he had for Detroit, he had 40 pressures this year. The next person in line for Detroit that had pressures only had 7. So just a massive difference. You recognize it from the very beginning, and statistically, everything backed it up. It's just a massive loss. It's a terrible loss for them.
Yeah, it is. But
But fortunately for them, their offense is outstanding. They got an excellent running back duo. They got the best offensive line in the league, and they just maul people. Ben Johnson's come back, certainly creative. They were looking to embarrass Dallas this week, and they certainly did. We're going to find how good Detroit can possibly be over the next 4 weeks. The next 3 out of the 4 weeks, they play the Vikings, the Texans, and the Packers. We're going to find out, who this Detroit team is post Aiden Hutchinson. We'll certainly see. Minnesota, what an excellent team. Their defense is great against the run. We talked about how their defense has just been transformed with Brian Flores at the helm, but they're great against the run, not so great against the pass. We'll see how it's tested. It should be a fun game this weekend. Interesting enough, Minnesota traded Houston today. They traded in a small, lesser that came out, a lesser trade that they traded for Cam Akers today. So Minnesota picked up Cam Akers today in a trade. Any of your thoughts on anything of those?
Cam Akers does not move the needle whatsoever for me. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up on the practice squad by the end of the year. I don't know. I mean, they must be desperate, but
I just wonder if there's if Aaron Jones, if they're kind of worried about his health, with his injury there. So gives you a little concern if you're a Vikings fan that they're trading for a running back, trying to shore up that position.
But I'm guessing the trade was something for a conditional 7th rounder or something, which tells you just how unimportant the acquisition was for both teams. Or the Rams just wanted to get rid of him, and there you go.
Last word on Minnesota, Detroit. What's your last word on that?
Well, we haven't done the line yet.
Oh, we haven't. Oh my gosh, sorry, man. I just was zooming on. I've got Minnesota 3, and I've got a total of 49.
Okay, you said 49, opened 50, still 50. You said 3 for Minnesota. I said 3 Minnesota. It opened 2.5. It's still at 2.5. So,
okay, we're right there.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
All right, next game is Philadelphia at the Giants. Philadelphia 3-2 coming off the win over Cleveland 20-16. Giants 2-4 coming off the loss to Cincinnati 17-7.
Yeah, interesting. This is kind of an interesting deal. I mean, this potentially who finishes last in the NFC East. Philadelphia, the way they're headed, the Giants seem to not want to go down quietly in the night like was predicted. But it's just kind of a bad division, save for the Commanders. But the Commanders look more like the future than the present. But sometimes you get thrust in the spotlight because of conditions, and I think they're getting thrust there because nobody else wants to take it in the East. So this one, weather-wise, 69 clear, northwest wind 6 miles per hour. Again, nothing, no good weather to really talk about this week, but some good viewing for the Giants and Eagles fans there. Really going to be a good game. I've got the Giants favored by 1.5, and I've got a total of 39.
Okay. You said 39 on the total. It opened 44. It's down to 43.
43.
You said Giants 1.5. I said Philadelphia 2. It opened Philadelphia 3, and it's still Philadelphia 3.
Okay. All right. I'm clearly a bigger believer in the Giants than that. Look, I think it's an interesting deal right now for the Giants. Got some really tough news. The Giants left tackle Andrew Thomas is in Charlotte today getting an evaluation. Potential Liz Frank injury that would require surgery. If it turned out to be Liz Frank, then he's done, requires surgery, done for the season. Really tough blow. One of the best left tackles in football. Certainly affects them greatly. We talked about Sirianni arguing with the fans. Interesting little stat. May be helpful for those that are interested in betting. Is that Philadelphia is the only team in the league that hadn't scored in the first quarter this year. And there's only been one team in the past 20 years that hasn't scored in the first quarter and actually through 6 games and made the playoffs. And that was the 2006 Jets, appropriately enough. They also have the other reason why I'm kind of down on Philadelphia. They have a -6 turnover differential, which is tied for 28th in the league. Jalen Hurts continues to turn the ball over. They are the only team in the NFL with a winning record and a negative turnover differential. You can see where that potentially is headed. Daniel Jones, after the game on Sunday night, is now 1-14 in prime time. That's the worst by any quarterback since 1970. Any thoughts on this game at all?
I saw something else about the Jets also being equally futile in primetime in their last 10 games or something like that. And they combined, they've won like 3 out of 20 or something between the two of them.
Yeah.
I like the Giants in this game right now, just on the surface. I think Philadelphia's a fraud. I mean, Nick Sirianni had that interaction with the fan after a game they won 20-16 over granted against Cleveland, but I mean, they won the game and the fans hated him, or we're still hating on him so much that he got into that altercation. So things are not good there, and I think the Giants are still showing some fight, which I'm surprised at a little bit because I think the writing's been on the wall all year for them, but they're still showing up. So I think I'm leaning toward the Giants ticket. I'd like to get 3.5 if I could, but we'll see.
I hate that Andrew Thomas is out, but I'm kind of with you.
I mean, I know how important left tackles are, but a lot of people overestimate how much a line will move due to somebody being out. Quarterbacks will move the line, maybe 3 or 4 points, depending on how big of a chasm there is between the starter and the backup. Yeah. Running backs and wide receivers, maybe a point, but left tackles, maybe a half point or a point, maybe at the most, if they're really good.
No question. I just hate the Giants. Felt like they were really coming together, having a team. Hate to see them. Hate to see that happen to certainly anybody. But anyway, we'll see. Moving on.
Okay. First of the 4 o'clock games. There's only 3 in the 4 o'clock window this week
because they stuck 2 games on Monday night.
Right. First one is Carolina 1-5 at Washington 4-2. Carolina coming off the loss to Atlanta 38-20. Washington coming off the loss to Baltimore 30-23.
Yeah, I think that this game here is a good depiction of how you draft, right? Washington is the template what Carolina was trying to do in drafting Bryce Young, and unfortunately they got door number 2. Washington got door number 1, and teams are completely on different trajectories. This should be a great game in Washington. 72 clear, winds northwest 5 miles an hour. I've got the line at I've got Washington at 11.5 and a total of 51.5.
Okay, total open. You said 51.5. It opened 51. It's at 51.5 now, so you're right on there. Pretty far off on the line. You said 11.5. I said 7.5. It opened 8, and it's down to 7.5.
Wow. Interesting.
Well, I'm not sure Washington has proven itself enough to the point where you're going to be, even against teams as bad as Carolina or say New England, I don't know if you're going to put them up closer to, above 10 against anybody yet. Maybe.
Yeah. They're just so dynamic, though, can score.
Very promising, but they still haven't, I mean, the loss to Baltimore was not an embarrassment, although they were basically down 2 scores. I think they kicked a field goal at the end to cut it to 7, tried an onside kick or something. But they were in the game the whole time. They hung in there, so that was impressive just for a loss. But I still don't think they're quite, like Detroit, I think, would be giving 10 against Carolina, something like that, at home.
Yeah. The only thing I really have about this game, defensive tackle John Allen out for the season with a torn pec. Tough blow for Washington there. Certainly, don't have much depth there on that defensive line. He was a good piece. That's going to be disappointing for them. But, Jaden Daniels is still the engine that drives that train.
Yep.
Let's go to the next game, which you didn't mention as one of the two games you're most excited about, but how can you not let this one be your game you're most excited about?
Yeah, this one's brutal. Good luck. How do you assess which of these teams is better? I don't know. Las Vegas 2-4 at the Rams 1-4. Vegas coming off the loss to Pittsburgh 32-13, and Rams coming off the bye. That bye might be an explanation for why this line is different than I thought it was, but we'll see.
Yeah, combined record of 3-8 between these two teams. Just kind of a miserable year. Seems like they're both kind of done. The Raiders, as we predicted in the preseason, we talked about. You brought it up. You're like, hey, you always talk about the substitute teacher. You bring him in. Everybody likes substitute teacher, and all of a sudden, you get them, and you're like, oh, that's why they're substitute teacher, and everybody wants the interim coach and.
Not to mention the backup quarterback playing as your starter.
Oh my gosh!
Good backup, not great starter.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yes. And as Aiden O'Connell, even a backup in this league, he's like a third string backup to me. So just a mess there. Devontae Adams not happy going out. You got Max Johnson or Max Crosby pushing coaches as he comes off the field. Said it was a love push. Certainly didn't look like that to me. But I have dubbed this game that whoever loses this game has to build the high-speed rail between the two cities. That's what has to happen.
Well, they get it done before the state of California will. So
yeah, I think that whoever does that should. Obviously, in a dome, there's no weather. My guess on this one, I put the Rams -5, and I put a total at 45.
Okay, total, you said 45, open 43. It is still 43.
Okay.
The number you said 5, I said 3 for the Rams.
Yep.
That was I think these are basically the same team playing each other at one team's home stadium.
Right.
You went with 5 for the Rams. You're right. It was 5, and now it's 6.5. So I'm not sure I understand that, but I guess maybe it's just a movement to acknowledge that Vegas is already waving a white flag, and how much motivation will the players have this week.
100%. 5 was a great line to grab. Raiders, as we talked about for a couple of weeks, are imploding. Haven't imploded. Just kind of an odd deal. You get Sean McVay off a bye week. Again, you've got a coach who knows what he's doing off a bye week against a coach who doesn't know what he's doing, and a team that has no direction. Just kind of an odd deal. I'll give you the last word and we'll move on.
Last word.
Okay.
Next game, last of the 4 o'clocks, is Kansas City 5-0 at San Francisco 3-3. Kansas City coming off a bye. Andy Reid off a bye. San Francisco coming off the win over Seattle on Thursday Night Football, so they got extra rest as well. 36-24 over Seattle. Yeah,
interesting deal. Neither team playing really to where they were last year, but still, I'll ask you this: is this a Super Bowl preview?
Not if San Francisco doesn't get off their butts and start playing better.
Well, they're having troubles in the red zone. They're getting McCaffrey back in November. That'll fix that. So they're going to be kind of a late arriving team instead of a team that has injuries late in the season, changes their team. They almost had them at the first season. Looks like they're going to get healthy by the end of the season. They'll get Dre Greenlaw back. They'll get you'll get Hufanga. He's been injured a little bit. Get him back, and then you'll have Christian McCaffrey back. I think this team they're poised to make a move.
Well, pump the brakes on Greenlaw. He's coming off an Achilles that he got in the Super Bowl. It's going to be less than a year when he gets back, and he plays a linebacker. He's not a quarterback who can sit in the pocket and hopefully push off a little bit. He's going to have a lot of lateral movement. I'm not sure if he's going to be himself until next year.
Sure.
And McCaffrey, anytime somebody says McCaffrey, I had the number 1 overall pick in my fantasy league. I took McCaffrey. Nobody was talking about this injury until later. And now they're saying, 6 more weeks or something. And it's like, okay, well, we'll see in 6 weeks. They could be 6-6 next time, when he gets back, and then they're going to have to win out or something to make the playoffs. So I'm not entirely sure that it's going to work the way that you're suggesting, but it might.
I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying that I see the possibility.
Yes, definitely.
Of it happening there. interesting enough, for you people that like player props, Kansas City is the worst team in the entire league at defending tight ends. So look for George Kittle to potentially have a big day there. Kansas City with 11 straight wins. Doesn't seem like they've had that many. I didn't think Trevor Lawrence had lost as many as that, but it certainly doesn't seem like Kansas City has won 11 straight, but they have. Their D-line is just absolutely dominant. I mean, that is just – it's almost their calling card. It's like Patrick Mahomes just knows that, hey, this is preseason for them. They're going to get the playoffs and then kind of turn it on. But until then, their defensive line is just gold. They just ate New Orleans lunch and just crushed Derek Carr. It was just a bad deal. We talked about San Francisco not being good on the red zone. Brock Purdy, for as many doubters, and he's fantastic on third downs, and is a really, really good quarterback. I'm excited to watch that game. That is certainly my game that I want to watch this weekend, along with the other two that we talked about. Just can't wait to watch that. Any final words on that game?
Well, we haven't done the line yet.
Oh, dude, of course. I've got San Francisco 1.5, and I got a total of 45.
Okay. You said 45. It opened 45.5, and it is now 47. So it's moving up. Not a lot of defense expected.
Interesting.
You said San Francisco 1.5. I said Kansas City 2.5. I mean, it's 5-0 against 3-3. I know San Francisco, but they're 3-3. So I'm a little surprised by that. Kansas City is a dog. I might not be able to resist. But you said 1.5 San Francisco. I said Kansas City 2.5. It opened San Francisco 1. It's now 1.5. So you're right on it now.
Okay. Yep. I kind of expected that. Look, San Francisco beat Kansas City up and down the field in the Super Bowl. And except for the final score, again, Kyle Shanahan, the fourth quarter, that is going to be, start off with Atlanta in the Super Bowl as offensive coordinator against New England. And it seems like it has just carried on with him since then. If they were to get double digits in this game, you can better believe I'll be pounding Kansas City if they get up early.
Okay. This one I found interesting, but I have to admit, when I made this pick, it was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. The Davante Adams thing hadn't come up yet. I'm really surprised by how much that seemed to have changed things. They sort of do what Vegas sometimes does when there's a change like that. They sort of reopen the number at a different number and then start from there. So this one's New York Jets 2-4 at Pittsburgh 4-2. Jets having lost to Buffalo 23-20. Pittsburgh having beat Vegas 32-13. And that's it. Yeah.
As you mentioned, Jets 2-4, Pittsburgh 4-2. I labeled this game the record the Jets thought they'd have, and that Pittsburgh does. I made my guess after the trade today, so I've got Pittsburgh at 1.5, and I got a total at 43.5.
43.5?
I do.
Okay. You said 43.5. Total open 37.5. It's up to 38. You said Pittsburgh 1.5. I said Pittsburgh 4. This was again before the Davante Adams thing. I don't remember what it was. I've already pasted over it, but it opened Pick'em, and it's now Jets -1.5. I don't see it. I'm not a big believer in Pittsburgh this year, but Davante Adams doesn't move the line from. It might have been like Pittsburgh -2 or something, like closer to your number when it opened before, and now it's a -1.5 for the Jets on the road against a team with a much better record, and granted, not the most impressive 4-2 in the league, but still, this doesn't look right to me.
Well, I can tell you, I can help you out on that. I in the preseason when we covered this, we did our podcast on each division, breaking everyone down. We talked about the 2-quarterback system here at Pittsburgh, and we talked about how you've got Russell Wilson, you've got Justin Fields. Russell Wilson was brought in first. Like I said, I'm fairly close to that organization. Russell Wilson was promised that if he came, he would start. He did not come to sit the bench. And now that he's quote unquote healthy, this is Mike Tomlin came out today and said that Russell Wilson is getting first team snaps and that he deserves an opportunity to play and see what he can do. And this is non-indictment. I said, quote unquote, it's non-indictment on Justin Fields. So Russell Wilson is most likely going to be your starter this week. And so that is probably why the line is where it is right now. And so that's what happened today. Really interesting. There's a lot that I could say about this game. I'm with you. Davante Adams is a Jet now. Will it help? I don't know. Aaron Rodgers is still 26 in passer rating and 26 in completion percentage. He is at best an average quarterback in the NFL, and I'm not even sure he's average. You saw him, when he was on script and they were calling plays early in the game, they were running the ball and doing that. But when they got in that 2-minute offense, he wasn't listening to anything. He was just slinging the ball. You had Breece Hall underneath when he decided to throw it deep and get that interception to Mike Williams, which he came out after the game and publicly blamed on Mike Williams that he ran the wrong route. I mean, again, Aaron Williams, you just don't see Patrick Mahomes when a receiver drops the ball or causes something. You don't see Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes just comes up to Mike and says the right thing. He said, I got to do a better job. I got to do this. It's on me. I got to do better. Even when it's clear the receiver's the wrong way, Aaron Rodgers is not that guy. He's going to blame somebody. He's never going to take accountability. He's not that guy. So really disappointed. But again, that's the offense they ran. They went back to the Aaron Rodgers offense at the end of the game, and that's where he threw the interception. He just chunked it up. He had plenty of time to move it down the field. Look, this is what you hired Aaron Rodgers for. Games are won and lost in the final 2 minutes, and you brought him in to win those close games. He didn't do it. Just not a fan. But I will say that the offense did improve. Had 73% pre-snap motion. That's 3 times more than they had under Hackett. And they also ran the ball a lot more, at least at first, till they got into critical situations where Aaron Rodgers, like, cool, guys, don't worry about it. I got it from here. The offense was better, but the defense was worse. Again, not surprisingly, you fired the guy, the best coach in the entire organization. You fired Robert Saleh, who was the architect of the defense. You moved the defensive coordinator, who's supposed to be really good, but you moved him into the head coaching position, and now he's distracted, right? Okay, he's distracted, and he can't run the defense, and now all of a sudden the defense is leaking oil. That shouldn't have surprised anybody. So for me, I certainly see that happen. Look, it's very clear to me. This happens. Like, I don't know about you, but when we started this, when I was privately just doing betting and not public, not, social media and not doing all our podcasts and shows, look, I had focus. I was just doing this, wasn't doing more things. I was much better than when we started off. When we started this off like 3 years ago, it was kind of rough for me because I was like trying to balance betting and trying to balance, the podcast and kind of get into doing the social media. And it was just a different responsibility. It kind of knocked me out of my routine. I'm sure that's done the same thing for him. It took me a while to absorb it and get back on track. He'll get back on track too, but will it be this game? I don't know. What are your thoughts on this game?
I think your points are valid, especially about the defensive coordinator being elevated.
Yep.
I don't know. I kind of feel bad for Jets fans. They're going all in with Davante Adams. I don't think he's going to be enough. So whatever they're giving up for him, which I think is like a third rounder, I think it was.
It's conditioned third round. Based on performance, could move up to second, but third round, You're right.
So,
yep.
They're going to be without a third round pick in next year's draft, maybe a second rounder. They probably still won't make the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers will be 1 year older, and they're just kicking the can down the road for when they're going to have to hit the reset button again.
Sure. Yeah.
So I like Davante Adams being added to a team like Kansas City maybe, although they're not really big on bringing over alpha dog kind of wide receivers. They're more of a team concept thing, but I'm not saying Davante Adams wouldn't fit in fine. I'm just saying Kansas City, he would make a great team, even better. In this case, he's taking a bad team and making it below average, maybe. So I've never understood why teams make these choices, but most everybody's praising him for it. They're saying it's they're all in on this because they've got this old quarterback and all this stuff, and if they don't strike now, they're never going to strike. Well, fine, but they're also saying they're probably going to cut him at the end of the year. So this is a 1-year thing for them because he makes something ridiculous next year, and it's one of those balloon payment final year things where it's set up to be a cut year. So we'll see.
Yep. 100% agree. One thing I didn't mention was that safety Chuck Clark for the Jets was placed on injured reserve today. Pretty big deal for them. High ankle sprain. Tough to get back from that. So anyway, moving on.
Okay. The first Monday night game is Baltimore 4-2 at Tampa Bay 4-2. Baltimore coming off the win over Washington, and Tampa coming off the win over New Orleans. Baltimore beat Washington 30-23. Tampa beat New Orleans 51-27, although that was a much closer game until late. But this one is going to surprise you, I think. It surprised me.
Yeah, weather 60 degrees, slight chance of showers, northwest winds 3 miles an hour. Again, no weather really to speak of. It is surprisingly in Tampa Bay, of all places, our lowest temperature of the entire week at 60 degrees. So I found that very interesting, kind of comical. My guess on this one, I put Baltimore favored by 3.5, and I put a total at 52.5.
Okay, total you said 52.5, open 49, down to 48.5. As for the line, you said Baltimore 3.5. I said 1.5. It opened 4. It's down to 3.5. So you nailed it. I don't get it. What does Tampa have to do to get some respect around here?
Well, I think that's the deal, right?
Yeah.
Is that they don't? I think Tampa Bay is a sneaky good team. I think that's it's Baltimore, right? Baltimore's king of the hill. They keep beating everybody, and they just kind of overwhelm people. But again. Baker Mayfield is playing well this year, except for the first half of the Saints games where, he had 2 interceptions all year. He threw 3 in the first half of that Saints game on Sunday. I was like, the bad Baker has come back. But, what was really encouraging to me, it showed a maturity of Baker, is that in the second half he regrouped, came back to the good Baker. But I think that's the cohesion between offensive Liam Cohen and Baker that – he was able to get him back on track. I noticed after Baker threw those interceptions, he knew Baker would be, his tendencies to press and to throw back at it because he's got a little bit of gunslinger mentality inside him, this machismo, but he had him start running the ball. He just had him run the ball after that for a little bit to kind of get him back on track, got him to halftime. They regrouped, came back on fire. They just destroyed the Saints in the second half. Was really impressed just by that series of those dynamics that kind of played out during the game. My whole thing about this game is that, look, I'm really surprised that line has gone down as far as a total. My whole thing is that will these teams together, will they break 100 points? Because I think this is just going to be a score fest. Lamar, look, I think this probably could be some of the line that you're talking about. Lamar's 22-1 versus the NFC after last week's game. Will he be 23-1 after Tampa Bay game? Lamar is well on his way to being the greatest running quarterback of all time. Probably already is, just not statistically. He on Sunday passed Cam Newton to be the second all-time quarterback rushing leader. He's only got 448 yards to pass Michael Vick to become the league's highest running quarterback, and he's only 27. So he's just going to smash that number. Going to be really interesting. I really think that Jaden Daniels is the next. You really saw the present and the future, kind of what we talked about last week. They're just really dominating. Again, Baltimore has the formula, right? They're paying Lamar, so they're kind of going all in on the offense. They're not paying the defense as much, and of course, that's a big concern because they've just got a bad pass defense. teams are going to score on them. But their run game is second in the league. I'm sorry, Tampa Bay, on the other hand, is not talked about enough because their run game, to your point, doesn't get enough respect. Their whole team doesn't get enough respect. Baker doesn't. Their offense doesn't. Tampa Bay is second in the league as far as their running game. They lead the NFL with 4 games with over 30 points. Nobody has scored that 30 points that many times. I think it's going to be a great game. I'm like you. I don't think Baker gets enough respect. I'll give you the final word on that one.
Well, I will say the 3 games I'm most surprised by line-wise are Philadelphia giving 3 at the Giants, San Francisco giving 1.5 at home against Kansas City, and Baltimore giving 3.5 on the road against Tampa Bay. I think Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Baltimore. Philadelphia is living on their reputation from 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl and lost. San Francisco is living on their reputation from last year where they went to the Super Bowl and lost. And Baltimore's living on their reputation, well-earned reputation, but I haven't been as impressed by them this year. I don't think they're the same team yet. Maybe they will be that. They've certainly gotten a lot better since they started 0-2. But I'm still not totally impressed by those 3 teams. I think they're still being bet like they were in their respective primes, personally.
Well, I think that provides an opportunity. I think you're absolutely right. We'll let that be the last word.
Okay, just an FYI real quick before we do the last game. The buys this week are Chicago and Dallas. Those are the 2 teams you will not hear about tonight. Now we've got the late game, 9 p.m. LA Chargers 3-2 at Arizona 2-4. Chargers coming off a win over Denver 23-16, and Arizona coming off a loss to Green Bay 34-13.
Interesting game. This one's in a dome, so no weather. My question for you, the way I've labeled this game, will anyone watch this game? So much for playing. These teams are like, hey, so much for playing on prime time. Why did you put us on ESPN Plus? So you've got us on ESPN Plus at the same time. Baltimore's going to be playing Tampa Bay. This is has potential to be the lowest rated or lowest watched prime time NFL game.
Why didn't they just put one on ABC and one on ESPN or something like they always?
I know, because they're trying to drive subscriptions for ESPN Plus. And
you're not going to do that with Chargers Arizona.
You're not going to do it with that game, and you're not going to do it with Baltimore Tampa Bay opposite. It's just incredibly disappointing. You can't go on YouTube and put them in kind of a dual box. This feels like just kind of a jump the shark moment where they've kind of gone too far. You're like, look, I get it. Last year you put Kansas City in their playoff game against Miami on Peacock and drove everybody's subscription. That was a standalone game. It was a playoff game. It drove subscriptions, accomplished that. But this is just a bridge too far. Hopefully this
Amazon Prime too. Amazon Prime used to. I don't think I've seen a game on there this year, but they've had games on Amazon Prime. Same thing.
Well, Amazon Prime's every Thursday night. I mean, so.
Oh yeah, but it's also on NFL Network. NFL Network too, right?
Yeah, I always watch it on Prime, so maybe it is.
Yeah,
so.
I always watch it on NFL Network. It's available on anywhere where NFL Network is being played.
Good point. So anyway, I just don't. I don't think a lot of it. I'll cover this quickly. Arizona plays kicker Matt Prater and defensive line Bilal Nicholas on IR today. Again, just hearing some things about Kyler Murray, this otherworldly talent. But again, I'm just hearing he lacks commitment to study things, and there's some real immaturity issues there that are still there. So, we'll see. Chargers certainly should be focused. Certainly wish all our best for Harbaugh as he wears a Holter monitor this week. Try to figure out the arrhythmia, the atrial flutter we had in the game. I've got this game. I've actually got Arizona favored by 1, and I've got a total of 43.
Okay, total you said 43. It opened 43. It's up to 44. I'm with you. I had Arizona favorite. You said by 1. I said 2.5. Thinking Chargers are a neutral field slight favorite. Maybe Jim Harbaugh is dining out on his reputation a bit because it opened Chargers 2. It's up to 2.5. So flip that to LA, and you're talking about 8.5 points. I don't see that big of a separation between these teams.
Yeah, interesting game. I don't know. I probably won't be watching it. It'll be one of the only NFL games that I haven't seen this year.
Well, for some reason, Tampa and Baltimore turns into a blowout for some reason.
I think the Chargers game. Which one starts earlier?
Baltimore Tampa Bay is at 8:15 because it's an East Coast game, right? The second one's in Arizona, so it's out west.
So it starts 45 minutes later.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I would have seen the first 45 minutes if they would have put it on first, but like you said, because it's West Coast, they're not going to do that. I may catch the tail end if it's worth it, but maybe not. Just disappointing all the way around. Smooth Andy, any final thoughts as you review all these? Did you see anything, any themes about this week that may make you lean one way or the other, just strategically, not specific games, but do you see anything that like, hey, is Vegas trying to do this something to us? I know you're not a total guy, but just with the sides, you see any home underdogs or a lot of those like we had last week, or is there something else that you see?
Just knee-jerk, just those 3 games I mentioned with Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Baltimore. I'd also probably throw Jacksonville in there. Why are they favored by 5.5 in a neutral field against another one from a team that's not very good?
Yep.
There's some lines that stink a little bit to me. Got the wrong side favored in a couple of them. I don't know why Denver's favored over New Orleans. We'll see how the betting goes. I'll see how it works out. It can't be any worse than last week in terms of. I felt pretty good about last week, and I got humbled. So this week has to be better. Obviously, it'd be hard to be worse. So I do like some things in the abstract, but I'm gonna have to see what the betting splits and the other things tell me when we start seeing more bets come in.
Well, you've crushed the past couple of weeks. So 1 week, if you have 2 weeks good, 1 week bad overall, you're going to have a great season. So that's part of betting. And if you stick to your strategy, you're going to win overall. And it's what we've done. It's what we've made a living off of in our career. So, congratulations on what you're doing. In true gambling fashion, we turned the page on last week and move forward. Matt, I think that's a wrap for us.
Sounds good to me. Good stuff. Looking forward to the weekend and Saturday morning. What do you guys say?
Yeah, absolutely. Smooth Andy, any final words for the faithful before we leave?
No, I'm good. I've said it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, hey, thanks for tuning in. Look, it's been a good week. I squeaked out a winning week this week in NFL and in college this week, so I'm excited. I like the lines this week. I feel really good about NFL this week. I love what I'm seeing this week. I'm excited about it. Please join us Sunday morning as we go over the lines again, or we actually place our best bets. But until then, please follow @SmoothAndy5 on Twitter. To follow Smooth Andy. That's the only platform he's on. He's been red hot this year. I'm at Uncle Phil's Locks across TikTok, across X, across Instagram, and also YouTube. Really trying to build that up. So please, if you get a chance, follow me on YouTube. Really enjoy that platform. I'm going to be putting some content that's unique out there just on YouTube. So please give me a follow there, and I certainly appreciate that. Thanks for your likes and your comments and your subscriptions. Guys, thanks for tuning in tonight. We know you have a choice what to do on Tuesday night. I think there's a baseball game tonight, Smooth Andy. So, guys, thanks for foregoing that and watching us. We appreciate your time. Guys, let's continue to have a good week. And as always, guys, let's roll.
Sound